Have you ever heard of a tree so important, so absolutely dominant, that when it disappeared, it changed an entire continent's landscape? Well, today, we're diving into the story of a lost legend of the American forest and the incredible, almost unbelievable fight to bring it back from the very brink of extinction. This is the story of America's lost giant.
Just look at this thing. This is the American chestnut, as it used to be. We are talking about a true giant of the forest, soaring 100 feet tall with these massive trunks, sometimes 5 feet across. They were like these giant pillars holding up the canopy, just a beautiful, majestic icon. But this picture, taken over a century ago, it captures a world that was just about to vanish forever.
Seriously, think about that for a second. Picture a forest you know, maybe one you've walked through. Now imagine a quarter of its biggest, most important trees just gone, wiped out. This isn't some hypothetical question. That is exactly what happened.
Okay, so to really understand what was lost, you have to get how vital this tree was. It wasn't just another tree in the woods. Nope. It was a cornerstone of American life. They even called it the cradle-to-coffin tree, and for good reason.
Let's start with the scale, because it is just mind-boggling. At the turn of the 20th century, there were an estimated 4 billion of these trees standing in the eastern United States. 4 billion. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around that number.
In their kingdom, their territory was huge. They covered a range of over 200 million acres. Let's see what that actually looked like.
This map right here really shows you the sheer dominance we're talking about. This whole green area, stretching all the way from Maine down to Georgia and west into the Ohio Valley, that was chestnut country. And right in the heart of the Appalachians, it was king. 1 out of every 4 hardwood trees you would have seen was an American chestnut.
And this tree basically built the nation. The wood was amazing, straight-grained, super rot-resistant, perfect for everything from your grandma's furniture to the railroad ties and telegraph poles that were connecting the country. The nuts, a super reliable food source, not just for bears and deer, but for farm animals and people too. And its bark was even a key ingredient for the leather industry. It literally supported people from the cradle they were born in to the coffin they were buried in.
You know, this picture really hits home the cultural loss. We all know the song, right? Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Well, this was the chestnut. Street vendors like this in New York City were a totally common sight around the holidays. So the big takeaway here is that losing the American chestnut wasn't just some ecological problem, it was a huge cultural and economic blow too.
And here's where the story takes a really dark turn. The thing that brought down this giant wasn't a logger's axe or a forest fire. It was an invisible enemy, a fungus that was accidentally brought over from Asia, and it kicked off one of the worst ecological disasters in American history.
The speed of this collapse was just terrifying. So the blight gets spotted for the first time in 1904. By 1911, that's only 7 years later, it was so bad that the New York Times was already declaring them doomed. Think about that. When a paper like that is writing your obituary, you know all hope is pretty much gone. And by 1950, in less than 50 years, the fungus had torn through the entire 200 million acre range, leaving a forest of dead, ghostly trunks in its wake. 4 billion trees, gone.
So how does this killer actually work? Well, it's brutally effective. Tiny little spores from the fungus just float on the wind and find a little wound in the tree's bark. From there, a canker starts to form and it just grows, destroying the vital inner bark. It's like it literally strangles the tree, cutting off the flow of water and nutrients from the roots up to the leaves. It just chokes the tree to death. For decades, it really seemed like that was the end of the story, a total tragedy. But this isn't just a story about loss. It's also an incredible story about hope, about human ingenuity, and just sheer persistence.
So, in 1983, the heroes of our story show up. A group called the American Chestnut Foundation, or TACF for short, gets formed. And they have this one incredibly audacious goal: bring the American chestnut back. They weren't just going to accept its extinction, they were going to try and reverse it.
Their main weapon at the start was a clever technique called backcrossing. Here's how it works. They took the blight-resistant Chinese chestnut and crossed it with our American chestnut. Then they take those kids and cross them back with pure American trees, and they do this again and again over generations. The whole idea is to create a tree that's like 99% American chestnut, but you've kept that one crucial gene for resistance from the Chinese tree.
And I think this quote from TAF's CEO, Lisa Thompson, just captures the whole spirit of this mission perfectly.
So much of conservation is about defense, trying to stop something bad from happening. But this was different. This was about going on the offensive to bring something amazing back.
Now, backcrossing was the foundation for sure, but man, is it slow. It takes decades and decades. But now, modern science is giving the team this massive upgrade, a way to basically hit the fast-forward button on this historic comeback. So you've got these two paths working together now. Backcrossing is that classic, patient approach that got this whole amazing project started. But genomic selection? Oh, that's the game changer. It's the modern accelerator that lets scientists pretty much peek into a tree's future.
It's called recurrent genomic selection, or RGS, and it is so cool. It's basically like having a DNA psychic. A computer model scans a tiny seedling's genetic code and can predict how resistant it's going to be to the blight years down the road. This means scientists can pick the best parent trees right away, without having to wait years and years for them to grow up. It's an absolute game changer that is shaving decades off the restoration timeline. So, with all this incredible science, all these decades of hard work, where does that leave us today? Are we actually seeing the seeds of a new forest being planted? And the answer is a huge, resounding yes.
This isn't just some experiment happening in a lab anymore. This is a massive, real-world effort. There are over 100 planting locations all across the tree's native range. You've got more than 5,500 passionate volunteers out there getting their hands dirty. And just in our national forests, more than 10,000 of these new, promising chestnuts are in the ground. It's happening. This comparison, side by side, it just says it all. On the left, you see that majestic, dense forest that we lost. And on the right, a single researcher planting one hopeful little sapling. It shows you just how far we have to go, yeah? But it also shows that the work has begun. The very first steps in a century-long marathon are being taken right now. And the ultimate goal, the dream behind all of this work, is to create a blight-resistant American chestnut that doesn't just survive, but can thrive and reproduce all on its own in the wild. The goal is to restore a keystone species, and in doing that, help to heal this really deep wound in the American landscape. You know, the story of the American chestnut is just this powerful testament to persistence, to science, and to hope. It proves that if we're dedicated enough, we can actually start to undo even the most catastrophic damage. And it leaves all of us with a really important question. If we can bring back an entire forest, what natural icon should we set our sights on saving next?